Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. Have you been through your highs and your lows, thinking, you know, nothing could be worse? I've been through it all. I've been through so much pain. I'm not even quite sure I can get through this anymore. Well, this conversation is truly for you to help you find your joy. I know you're never done with life. My guest, Dick Beardsley, will be telling us his own story. Dick is a compelling keynote motivational and inspirational speaker. He's shared his story with students of all ages and Fortune 500 companies, with nonprofit organizations, conferences, corporate events, fundraising gala, and so many more. The responses are always the same. Dick has made a difference in the lives of people from all walks of life. For a brief moment, during the 1982 Boston Marathon, Dick became the most famous athlete in the world by losing the race. Well, that was just the beginning of a lifetime of extreme highs and lows. He's been through so much tragedy in his life, from a near-fatal car accident, which left him physically broken. He's gone through pain addiction to the drug tablets, and having to recover from that pain. He's gone through a number of accidents where he had to go to the hospital. Most importantly, and most painful of them all, was losing his son to suicide. Rather, now he's turned his pain to purpose and helping so many people out there going through difficult times in their lives and helping them to find their joy again. I'm truly excited that he's here to join us all the way from the United States to share his story and help you. If you're going through anything, any struggle, listen to this conversation. Find your joy with Dick. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. This conversation is truly compelling. It's about moving mountains. Have you been stuck somewhere and believing that this is the end of your own journey, that you shouldn't even try and make things better for yourself because you just think everything hard has hit you? Well, my guest will be telling you about his own journey, how he's managed to overcome all those obstacles in his life to keep pushing the stone and keep finding his joy. Dick will be telling you his amazing story. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, Ann. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I'm truly honored to have you today because your journey is so compelling. It's unbelievable. Like, you are a keynote speaker. You share your life story of extreme highs and low, and you tell people this story so openly, so people understand that it doesn't matter what they go through, they can still find their joy and their happiness along the way. But Dick, before we get started into any of this journey, can you briefly tell us, who are you?
Well, I'm Dick Beardsley. I live in Bemidji, Minnesota, which is about 230 miles north of Minneapolis. We're almost to the Canadian border. So
Oh,
it's a beautiful area. We've got over 400 lakes within 20 miles of our town, but it gets cold here in the wintertime, very cold. But when you're born and raised in this part of the world, you're going to get used to it. And I've been a fishing guide here in the area. I'm 66 now, and I've been doing it since I was 12 years old. So I love doing that. In fact, I just got in off the water just an hour ago from taking some folks out fishing. And my wife Jill and I own Lake Bemidji Bed and Breakfast, which is also our home, but it's also a bed and breakfast. And I'm sitting upstairs looking out over beautiful Lake Bemidji right now. So we're very blessed with what we have here in Bemidji. And my wife Jill, she's the main the main person with the bed and breakfast, and she loves it and enjoy what I do. And I do a lot of motivational speaking also. So we've both been very blessed.
Absolutely. No, I'm really glad that you live in a place which you truly love and that you feel so blessed just living there. You know, I would have to go to your journey when you were a child growing up. What was it like? You came all the way, you were born in Cuba and you went over to the United States. So what was it like growing up as a child?
Um, it was it was good. I mean, my folks they were wonderful parents, but they drank a lot, so that was a little bit difficult. But other than that, I mean, I pretty much had a normal childhood. My dad loved to hunt and fish, so I got involved in the outdoors very, very early in my life. I have two younger sisters, and I'm the only one that stayed in Minnesota, but they've moved where it's a little bit warmer. But yeah, it was pretty much what I thought was a typical upbringing, maybe by today's standards, not so much. But and it wasn't always easy with my mom and my dad, especially my dad. My dad traveled quite a bit, and it was if he'd been drinking a little too much, he never like spanked us too hard or anything like that, but verbal abuse can be kind of difficult too. But my dad, the neat thing about my dad was in 1982, my dad quit drinking, and he never had another drop of alcohol for the next 14 and a half years until he died of pancreatic cancer. And then my dad became my best friend, which was pretty cool.
That's amazing. That is truly amazing. And it just shows the story of what alcohol or doing certain things to an extreme limits, what they can do to our health and what they could do to our lifestyle, and how that transformed your life in terms of your relationship with your father once he stopped drinking. Well, when you look back, what changed in him that when he stopped the drinking?
Well, he just became more loving almost. I knew my dad loved me, and I was the only child or only boy in the family. So my dad and I did a lot, but like my dad never said I love you. And if I had said to him, Dad, I sure do love you, and he'd always go, me too. He just could never get those words out of his mouth. But I knew he loved me. And then when he quit drinking, I remember I was over at his house one night, and I went over and we were done, and I gave him a hug and said, I love you, Dad. And my dad looked at me and he says, I love you too, D. And it was the first time, and I was an adult. That was the first time I'd ever heard those words. And I started crying. And I get emotional talking about it now. And afterwards, after that first time when he said that, there wasn't another time when I would talk to my dad, either in person or over the phone, that at the end of the conversation, he never ever again didn't say I love you. And that was worth gold to me. It just, even though I knew he loved me, it was worth gold. So with my son Andy and with my wife Jill, um, my sisters, there's never a time when I'm talking to them that I don't finish the conversation with saying I love you. Because you know what, and I mean it when I say it, because you just never know, that might be the last time you ever see that person. And so we can't take anything for granted. And yeah, they might know that you love them, but when you tell it to them, it makes a difference.
It is absolutely true, and I agree. I try and use that word all the time because sometimes we take our life so we don't believe that something can happen, but it does happen. We're not here to be here permanently. So the more we use it, the more we remind others how much we love them. I think it gives so much courage and it gives them so much strength that even if something bad does happen to us, they will always remember the good times. They will always remember that even when you went with love because you loved them. So I love that you said that. It's really amazing, Dave. One of the things that's so special about you is your ability to run. You love to run. I mean, you've been doing this for a very long time. What got you into this area of sports?
Yes, I get that question quite a bit because growing up, again, I grew up in the outdoors, fishing, hunting, all that kind of thing.
Mm.
And I was a real shy kid growing up for some reason. I just was. And up until I was 17 years old, I'd never had a date with a girl. And I was petrified with them. And then when I was starting my junior year of high school, I walked through my high school doors. And when I did, it was like suddenly my hormones had changed.
Mm.
And for the first time in my life, girls, I started showing an interest in them. But like I said, I was way too shy to even say hi to them, let alone ask them out on a date. But I noticed in the town that I went to high school in that a lot of the guys that were good in sports over here in the US, you get what's called a letter jacket that you can wear around, and it's kind of a cool thing to have. Well, I noticed all the guys that were wearing letter jackets had girls hanging all over them. So I thought, well, golly, all I got to do is earn myself a letter jacket. So I went out for American football. And, it's a rough sport. I'm 6 foot tall, 135 pounds, soaking wet. But I went out for football. I got game tackled the very first day of practice. I fought my way out of that pile of guys. And when I stood up, my helmet was on crooked and my shoulder pads were sticking out. My football pants were down to my ankles. And I remember thinking, there's not a girl alive worth going through this. So I quit. My entire football career lasted about 43 and a half minutes. Now, I was totally disappointed, but sometimes, as a person, what we perceive as terrible disappointments can turn into incredible blessings. And that's what it did for me. A couple of days later, I heard about this other sport in the fall at our high school called cross country running. And I thought, well, gosh, how hard can that be? And so I showed up for the first day of practice. I didn't even own a pair of running shoes. And our coach said, we're going to do the around the block run. Well, I thought I can surely run around the block and stay with my teammates. Well, their around the block run was actually 3.2 miles long. And I actually had to walk the last mile. By the time I got back to my high school, all my teammates and my coach had already showered and gone home. But I remember crossing that imaginary finish line after the run. And I was so excited because I remember thinking, gosh, Dick, I don't know how far you just ran and walked, but you made it. And I said to myself, I'll just bet you, Dick, if you work real, real hard, if you do what your coach tells you to do, if you believe in yourself, have faith, I'll just bet you, Dick, you can get good enough to make the varsity team, to earn the letter jacket, to get the date with the girl. And at that time, that was my whole inspiration for running, was to try to get a date with a girl. And I wasn't very good. I never made it to our state meet here, which is a big deal in Minnesota in cross country or track, but I'd fallen in love with this incredible sport of distance running. And then after high school, I went to a small 2-year college, and I had a wonderful coach there. And I started to improve a lot there because it seemed like the further I ran, the better I was. And in college, I could run up to 10,000 meters. And one day after practice, all my other teammates had gone in, and my coach, John Folkrod, was timing me along the edge of a cornfield doing quarter-mile repeats. So we got all done and we're walking back into the Phi Ed building, and he put his arm around my shoulder and he says, Dick, I really believe you can become as good of a runner as you want to be. And I never, ever forgot that. And there were many times that I felt like quitting, and because I didn't think I was good enough. And I'd remember back to what Coach Folkrod said. So, it's so amazing when you say something to somebody, whether it be positive or negative, you never know how it's going to affect that person at that moment, tomorrow, next week, next month, or years down the road. And I still think about those words quite often is, Dick, I really believe you can become as good of a runner as you want to be. So I was very blessed. I had every coach I had brought me to a different level, and I still run every day. I'm slower than molasses in January now, but I go to bed at night and I can hardly wait to get up in the morning to go for a run.
Oh, that's amazing. That is truly amazing that you just from sheer random acts, you become this great runner, and you found your true joy and passion in running. And also, from a kind word of your coach telling you these words that he believed in, almost like he believed in you, and you took that on
Yes.
board. You really did take that on board. Dick, I have to ask you, because you've gone on from doing this, you've improved, you became a marathon runner, and you improved your marathon runner 13 times in a row. When you're still a Guinness, you went on from doing this from sheer pleasure to becoming a Guinness World Record holder. How do you motivate yourself each time and every time to go out and become faster than yesterday?
And it was something that I never purposely went into a marathon to say, I'm going to try to run faster than my last one. I didn't even know I had this record until a couple of years later when somebody, my best friend, called me up and said, Beard, you're in the World Book of Guinness Records. I said, for what? But here's what I did. And I still try to do this every single day. And I was just talking to this about my fishing guide clients I had out this morning in the boat. But every time I entered a race, my goal was to do the very, very best I could do. So it wasn't like I'm going to hold back. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to run as hard as I can, as long as I can. And if I blow up because I went out too fast, well, you learned a good lesson. And so I went into each race with the idea of, I'm going to run the very best I can. And some of those at the end of the race, I might have got first place or I might have got 100th place. But at the end of the day, I can look back now and I can't recall any race of any distance that I'd ever run that at the end that I might not have been satisfied with my place that I finished in the race, but I was never not satisfied with knowing that today I gave it my very, very best. And that's all a person can do, whether it be in a running race, in a business you own, dealing with your family. If at the end of the day, you can look back on the day and say, well, you know what, today I gave it my very best, and you should be able to go to bed with a big smile on your face. So that's kind of the attitude I took with running. And it's pretty much the attitude I've taken in life is just, hey, sometimes you get thrown a monkey wrench into things. But at the end of the day might have not gone the way you had maybe hoped it would. But at the end of the day, if you dealt with it the best you could, well, then there you go.
That's true. In 1982, you did the Boston Marathon race, and that brought lots of emotions to you because you won, then lost in a very short time. I was quite sure what that meant. Could you tell me about that 1982 Boston Marathon journey?
Yeah, so I ran the 1982 Boston Marathon, and I was going up against a guy named Alberto Salazar, who was world record holder at the time, and he'd never been beaten before. And that year, about 10,000 runners in the race, which back then was a lot of runners. Not like the marathon now, where there's 50,000 or something like that. But that race, it developed by the point where we got down at about 17 miles. There were two of us left in the lead group, and as the Boston Globe said the day before in the paper, Alberto Salazar, the world record holder, and Dick Beardsley, the country bumpkin from Minnesota. And nobody gave me, much of a chance at all, or for that fact, anybody. But I remember at the Boston Marathon, when you hit 17 miles, you make a right-hand turn, and then there's a series of 4 big hills that you have to run up over the next 4 miles. And so my coach going in says, he told me, when I get to those hills, and if I'm in that lead group, he says, I want you to run up the hills as hard as you can, and on the downside even harder. Like a good soldier listening to his commander, I hit that first hill and ran it as hard as I could, tried to shake Salazar, nothing. Same with the second, same with the third. And then the biggest, longest, steepest hill is the infamous Heartbreak Hill. It's almost a mile long, and any runner that's ever run a marathon has heard about Heartbreak Hill. And I ran that thing as hard as I could, trying to shake him. And I get to the top, and I look over my shoulder. He's right in my back pocket. So on the downside, I'm literally felt like I was doing the 100-meter sprint, running as hard as I could, trying to shake him. And I got down to the bottom where it flattened out. And he was so close to me, I didn't have to look to see if he was there. All I had to do was I could hear him breathing. And at that point, I could no longer feel my legs. And the thought of having to run 5 more miles at the pace we were running was almost making me sick to my stomach. But I knew he had to be hurting just as bad as I was. And I knew this. I knew no matter how bad I was hurting, I knew I could run 1 more mile. Well, the good Lord has given us this incredible gift between our ears called the brain. And my brain somehow convinced my body that I didn't have to run 5 more miles. I just had to run 1 more. So now all of a sudden, the task at hand didn't seem quite so daunting. So I remember I get to the 22nd mile mark. I've got about a 2-stride lead. I go, okay, Dick, just 1 more mile. And there's the 23rd, and I say it again, and then the 24th. And as long as I live, I'll never forget what I saw next. So in front of me on that street, in blue and gold paint, it said 25.2 miles. And right below that, it said 1 mile to go. At that point, honest to goodness, I got so weak-kneed and rubber-legged, I did not know if I'd be able to take another step. And at that point, for some reason, the tears just started streaming down my cheeks.
Yeah.
And at that point, for some reason, I flashed back to the day in May of 1975 when I walked off my high school stage, the first one in my family to get a high school diploma. And I walked out to where my mom and dad were sitting, and my dad, who had an 8th grade education, was crying. So I handed my dad my diploma, and he handed me a small little envelope, and he said, "D, here, this is your graduation gift from your mom and I." So I opened it up and I pulled out this small piece of paper, and in my dad's 8th grade handwriting, it said, "D, this is good for round trip airfare to the Boston Marathon. Maybe someday you'll want to run it. Love, Mom and Dad." Here I am, not just running it, but I'm winning it. And I knew my folks were, watching back home in Minnesota. And I remember thinking, Dick, you got to get your mind off your mom and dad. And so I got refocused. And with about 900 meters to go, I had about maybe a 10-meter lead on Salazar. And I knew he didn't have a great finishing kick, but I knew he had a lot better one than I had. And I thought to myself, Dick, you've got to push now like you've never pushed before. And as I pushed off with my right leg to try to open up that gap, I got the biggest Charlie horse in my right hamstring, and it literally set me up in the air. And Salazar went flying by me like I was running backwards. And so for one moment, I'm thinking, I'm going to win this Boston Marathon. And now a second later, I'm thinking, am I going to finish it? And I remember thinking, okay, Dick, just keep running, even though it's slow, work on that hamstring. So I'm rubbing my hamstring. The state troopers that were on motorcycles trying to keep all the spectators back surrounded Salazar, and I'm running along, and the crowd moved back, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And my right foot came down into a big pothole I didn't see, and I hit it, and I stumbled and almost fell to the ground. But when I almost fell to the ground, it jerked my leg and it popped the knot out, and now I got my stride back. And I'll tell you, I learned more about myself in those last 2 minutes of that race that has helped me get through way more difficult things in my life than that Boston Marathon 40 years ago. And what I learned on those streets in Boston way back then was that no matter how difficult the situation you're in is, no matter how high the mountain is to climb, is that you never, ever, ever give up. And it's about, it's about having that determination and the confidence, and it's about the commitment and having faith. And I started pumping my arms and lifting my legs, and I felt like I was flying. And we make one last right turn, and about 3 blocks up a slight hill. And when I came around that last corner, when you watch the video, you'll hear the TV announcer go, "Alberto Salazar is going to win the 1982 Boston Marathon as he's out-dueled Dick Beardsley," because he got almost 100-meter lead on me. And all of a sudden, I come around the corner, and this announcer starts going, "But watch Beardsley. He's making a move, but the motorcycle's got to get out of his way." So we get up to the top of this little hill, and the state troopers on the motorbike didn't even know I was back in the race. So a couple of them turned out to the right to keep the crowd back, and they kind of cut in front of me, so I had to go out a wide around them. But I got around them, caught back up with Salazar, and now it came down to 100-meter sprints. We'd run over 26 miles, and that day we were fortunate to we both broke the American record and the Boston course record. It was the first time in history that 2 men had ever gone under 2 hours and 9 minutes. Alberto won the race that day, ran 2 hours, 8 minutes and 51 seconds, and I ran 2 hours, 8 minutes and 52.6 seconds, which they rounded up. So 1.6 seconds. And Ann, when I crossed the finish line, I remember looking up and seeing the clock still reading 2:08. And half of me had never been so excited about anything in my life. The other half had never been so disappointed, because I'm thinking, I just ran a 2:08 marathon, but I got second, but it was an amazing race, that's for sure.
When you look at those events of your running, how has that changed your approach to future races after what happened? How did that change your approach?
After that race in Boston, it opened so many doors up for me. I was fortunate to get invited around the world to compete, and it was 2 years before the Olympics in Los Angeles, and I thought, man, I'm going to make the Olympic team, maybe win a medal. In fact, Sports Illustrated, the magazine back then, did an article, and some of the writers said not only will Beardsley make the Olympic team, they thought I was going to win a medal probably, and it couldn't have been going any better. And it just gave me so much confidence to know that I could compete against anybody at any level. Maybe not always win, but at least be competitive. And then unfortunately, about 9 months before the '84 Olympic Games in Los Angeles, I blew out my left Achilles tendon, and the Olympic orthopedic surgeon for the U.S. built me a new one and said I couldn't run for 6 months, but I didn't have that kind of time. So 6 weeks later, I started training again, and back then I could take the pain and just put it out of my mind. I got back to doing high miles and training hard again. And a couple of months later, I was in California to run a race, and I came around a sharp turn and had to push off with my left foot, and it snapped again. And so there went 1984 Olympics out the window. I couldn't run for 2 years. I tried to make a comeback to make the '88 Olympic team, but I just could never quite get back to that level again. And then at the age of 32, I retired. And nowadays that's kind of just hitting your prime for a marathon runner, but back then there wasn't the money to be made in it. And so then I moved back to my Minnesota dairy farm and was going to, milk a bunch of cows and do my fishing guide business, raise a bunch of kids, and life was going to be grand.
Dan, the thing about your life, which is so fascinating, is that you've had so many obstacles, especially in terms of injury, that's impacted you. One of the big obstacles, which you had, another nerve-fated farming accident you had multiple car accidents, hit by a vehicle while running, and even falling off a cliff. What is your psychic to survival and regaining that momentum to move forward in life? Because these are major obstacles that many people, normal people, will just go through and just okay, be afraid of life. Let me be honest with you. It'll be called that, be afraid. I'm never going to do that anything again because I think I'm just this person. But there is you keep going and going. Could you just share with us, what is your psychic and momentum that keeps you going?
Yeah, and I tell you, I've been asked that question before by other people, and how did you after those accidents and 20-some surgeries to put you back together and on and on and on, weren't you afraid to just wake up in the morning like something's going to happen? And I never ever looked at it like that. I never woke up and thought, well, I wonder what's going to happen to me today. And I never questioned God or anybody else. Why is this happening to me? My faith, my belief is that things happen and you deal with it and you try to move forward. And the last thing I wanted to do was, you know, be afraid to go out and enjoy life and enjoy the outdoors, and you just endure. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't always easy. You know, you're in the hospital, and you know they're cutting you open, they're replacing this and putting that in, and but I just always tried to focus on the positive sides, because you know there on a number of those accidents, you know, I could have easily been killed and not even be here anymore. So I woke up thinking, man, I'm still alive. That's a good day. And now you just kind of move forward, and then I ended up getting addicted to narcotic painkillers. And you know, growing up, I didn't never done any illicit drugs, you know, hardly drank or anything like that. And then, you know, I got addicted to these opioids. And I'll tell you what, as difficult as it was, you know, running the Boston Marathon, and as difficult as it was to go through those accidents and all the surgeries to be put back together, that was a walk in the park compared to dealing with an addiction to these drugs. I mean, it got to the point where I was doctor shopping, you know, going from one doctor to the next, trying to get more prescriptions. And finally, I just, you know, I ran out of doctors to go to, and I started to forge my own prescriptions. I mean, I had never been any trouble in my life. I'd never stolen a piece of bubble gum, and here I am doing something that I could have gone to prison for. But all that mattered, it's amazing how powerful those drugs are. All that mattered was to get the drugs, take the drugs, and make sure I didn't get caught. And upwards by the summer of 1996, I was taking a cocktail of Valium, Percocet, and Demerol, all very highly addictive drugs, upwards of 80 pills a day. That I didn't die is an absolute miracle. And thankfully, I got caught trying to, you know, in a drugstore with a fake prescription. And it was such a relief.
Yeah.
And I knew I needed help, but I was ashamed of what I was doing. I was so, you know, afraid of that. But the moment I got caught, I knew I was in a lot of trouble, but I was also so thankful and so blessed that I was still alive. And I knew the only chance I had, if there was any chance at all to get better, was to be 100% truthful, take responsibility for my actions. And that's what I did.
You know, Dick, wait, I love what you said about that, because I think this is the biggest problem, is that people know they're in pain, but if the biggest thing and biggest shameful thing is that people are afraid to admit that they're in pain or ask for help. You know, you knew you were in pain, you knew you were struggling with the drug addiction, but the biggest pain you had actually wasn't the drug addiction, was the fact that you were too embarrassed to ask people for help. So the help came
Yes.
in an unsettling way, in the sense that you had to go to let society, someone catch you, let the law, you know, do it in a more painful way by you having to go to deal with the consequences of having to prescribe fake drugs for yourself. When you look back at it, at the experiences of what that pain, those things cost you, the addiction cost you, what would you advise someone who's in a similar position right now? Because, you know, right now there's so much access to drugs, and so many of these people are desperate to get out, but you just don't know how. What would you tell someone in a similar position, or ways they could actually get out of this difficult pain they're going through?
Yes. Is reach out to somebody. And
Absolutely.
it's, you know, it's embarrassing, and you don't want to admit that some little pill could take complete control of my life. And for me, if I wouldn't have got caught when I did, I don't know if I would have been around many more days, because I was taking so many pills. And I look back, and it's easy to look back and say, well, why didn't you just reach out and ask somebody for help? It was because I was too embarrassed. We all have pride and whatnot, and you think, and I was still in denial. I didn't think I really had a problem. I just thought, well, you know, yeah, you're probably taking a few too many of these, but it's no big deal. Well, that's number one. When you're hooked on that stuff, you can come up with every excuse under the sun why you need to take it. And I mean, every time I took a pill, in my mind, I understood why I was taking it. You know, I use all the accidents that I had, all the surgeries that I had as an excuse why I needed to take these. And so reach out, whether it be a friend, a spouse, a clergy person, and walk into the hospital and say, I need help. And it's not going to be easy. Believe me, when I didn't have to go to prison. I was given probation because I'd never been in any trouble. And I was very honest about what I was doing and everything. But when they put me in the hospital, they put me on a drug called methadone. It's what they put heroin addicts on. It's nasty stuff. And I became addicted to the methadone while in the hospital under doctor's care. So they sent me to a big hospital down in Minneapolis. And I remember I got to that hospital about 2:00 in the morning, and the withdrawals were nasty. And they took me to my room, and I laid there, cried all night long. I was in such agony. And the next morning, the doctor walked in. He says, Dick, methadone withdrawal is one of the worst things you're going to ever go through in your life. He says, you're going to feel like you're going to die. He says, there may be times you're going to wish you could die, but he says, I promise you, we will not let you die, but the next 7 days or so, and his exact words, he says, are going to be pure hell. And honest to gosh, Ann, for the next 7 days, I never slept 1 minute. I would lay in my bed, and the pain in my bones and my arms and legs was so intense from the withdrawals. I honestly, if I'd have had access to a saw, I think I would have sawed off my arms and legs. I would have had to feel better. And in the morning when it was time to get up, it was a struggle to get my legs on the outside of the bed and to put on a clean pair of pants and a clean shirt. It seemed like it took me forever, but I never missed a meeting with my little group to try to learn how to deal with this and get better. And there were mornings that I was so sick from the withdrawals, I could not stand up and walk down the hallway to my group meeting. I had to crawl on my hands and my knees like a dog. And I remember crawling down the hallway one day, trying to get to my meeting, and I blacked out. I don't know how long I laid there, but when I woke up, I was laying in my own vomit. And I remember at that point looking up and say, I get choked up talking about this. And I looked up, I said, God, please, God, either take me right now, or please, God, help get me better. And that night I actually slept for a little bit. And the next night, a little bit more and a little bit more. And after I'd been there for about a month, I started to feel what it was like to be me, Dick Beardsley, without those drugs in my body. And I liked how it made me feel. Has it been easy? No. But anything in life that's worth pursuing, it's not easy. It takes great effort. And I've been blessed. This past February 12th, I celebrated my 25th year of sobriety.
Wow.
From the drugs. And
congratulations.
And
I'm truly honored and happy for you. It's truly amazing. You are such an inspirational person for so many people out there. And I think rather than we should have any kind of tears of joy, we just have tears of, just unbelievable tears of happiness, because just imagine what you're doing for so many others. You might think you went through this, but imagine other people right now who are desperate going through this. And your words are going to change someone else and make them realize if they go through it, if they stick with their plan, they will make that much difference. So
yes, yes.
That you said
you are 100% right, Ann.
Yeah.
And when I'm able to share that story with others, and to know that if one person in a group of 100, it makes a difference to them, and they find a way and they get on the good side of drug addiction, man, then I look back and say, I sure wouldn't want to go through it again, but it was worth it.
It was
to help somebody else.
Exactly. And it's just, we tend to forget. And this is what is so magical about the world is that sometimes we have to go through pain to save so many others from going through that similar pain. And I think this is just truly amazing, your story, and you just sharing this, beautiful words with us. Dick, your life has just been such such a journey. You've also gone through other kind of, not your personal tragedy, but your own relation had suicide, had a suicide attack. What happened there? Can you just share with,
Yeah,
this
I
is
will,
quite,
Ann.
yeah.
Yes. So, I look back on some of these things that happened in my life. I was 25, 26 years old when I had that race in Boston, and that race beat me up.
Mm,
And after I a couple of months recovered from that, I remember thinking to myself, well, one thing is I'll never have to go through anything more difficult than that. You're young, and that's how it beat me up. But of course I was wrong. And then I had that string of accidents and surgeries, and once I got recovered from that and kind of got my body rebuilt, I'm thinking, well, sure wouldn't want to go through that again, but I know I'll never have to go through anything more difficult. And that's how you kind of keep going, I guess. Well, then of course I was wrong. And after I had a few years of sobriety, I remember thinking to myself, I would never, ever wish an addiction on anybody. I would never want to go through it again, put my family through it. But the one good thing is, I know for a fact, unequivocally, I will never go through anything in my life
mm,
more difficult. I would have bet my life on it. And then I was wrong. My son Andy, when he was 21, he joined the United States Army, and I was so proud of him. It made my meager accomplishments in athletics seem like nothing, and it was an honor for him to serve our country. He got deployed over to Iraq. He was a gunner on helicopters over there, and he had to do some things and saw some things that weren't real pleasant, but he made it back home in one piece. But he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and 6 years ago, my son Andy took his life,
mm,
and I was I was absolutely devastated. I
mm,
mean, it makes all the things I went through, even the addiction, seem minor.
yeah,
The last thing a parent ever wants to happen
mm,
is to bury a child
yeah,
when the child is supposed to bury. Andy was supposed to bury me.
mm,
Um, but and that one hit me hard. I mean, it hit me really hard. And I even thought about taking those drugs again just to get away from the pain. But I knew that would be the last thing Andy would want. And it would have been easy to just wallow in sorrow for the rest of my life. But I knew Andy would not,
want that.
that would be the last thing he wanted me to do.
Absolutely.
And and so now I speak at a lot of suicide events and tell Andy's story, my story, knowing that if I can share that story, as hard as it might be to share, and it changes some person's mind to think that, I guess my life isn't really as bad as I think it might be,
Mm,
then you know what? Andy's death isn't in vain. And so I try to do that. But I think about Andy all the time. I talk to him every day.
mm,
And to know that someday I'll be able to give him a big hug again
yeah.
leaves me with peace and gives me great joy and hope.
I'm so glad you found and you've utilized Andy's, unimaginable tragedy to now reach out to others who might be going through similar pain, who might be thinking of taking their own lives because they don't feel this world is still good enough for them, especially after the pandemic. So many people have
Yes.
thought about this. There's so many people thought, what is life after all? I've lost my job. I feel a lot of people went through divorces. They just went through all different kinds of pain, and it might not be that much of a pain, but to them this was so big, and they just all thought about taking on their own lives. And your story would touch so many people. How did this lead you on now? Because I see you're a big motivational speaker, you speak everywhere. How did this lead you on to that beautiful journey?
Yeah, I've been, being a shy kid to getting up in, front of 4,000 people, and like I tell people, I might not be if some bigwig speaker was sitting in the back room, I might not get a very high grade because I'm more of a storyteller. And so what I do is I use life stories because every one of us has life stories. They might not be the exact same, obviously, but everybody has a life story. And so I just share stories depending on what the messages are looking for. They tell me what message they're looking for, and I use life stories to get there. And I enjoy doing that. And I found out many years ago that that yes, you've got to get the message across, but you need to do it in kind of an entertaining way also. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
you lose the people.
Yeah.
And so I've been blessed with that ability to be a good storyteller and get the message across. And I love doing it. And every day when I'm out in my fishing boat with guide clients, it we're all sharing stories out there, and you get to share more. And I can do it in a boat with two other people, or I can do it on a stage with 1,000 people out in the audience, and it's enjoyable, and I really enjoy doing it.
That's so fascinating. When you look at your life, where does faith come in? Would you say there's a role faith has to play in helping you overcome all this pain that you've been through?
I I would not be here without my faith. I mean, um, and people, it's their choice, but people that don't believe, I don't know who they turn to in times of trials and tribulations, and in good times too. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my life I have looked up and prayed and for help, and it always came. It maybe didn't come right away, but it came. And I it's almost hard for me to talk about it because I don't know how to explain it other than my my faith has gotten me through so many difficult situations in my life. So I'm very blessed that way.
Yes. Dick, I have to ask you the final question before I let you go. What are the messages that truly help people to be confident that they could find happiness and joy in their lives, no matter what has befallen them?
And here's what I've done for a long time. And I never used to share this until a few years ago. And it's something I try to do every morning when I wake up. And it's four things, and anybody can do them. And they have helped me through so many difficult situations in my life. And these four things are this: when I wake up in the morning, I try to wake up with a smile on my face, enthusiasm in my voice, joy in my heart, and faith in my soul. Those four things have got me through so many difficult situations in my life. You do those four things, and they will help you through difficult situations in your life.
This is wonderful. I can't believe that you've shared this amazing story with me. I mean, your story is truly inspiring. It's inspired me to keep climbing that mountain, never to give up, believe in oneself, because, yeah, life is full of tragedy. This is why we live on this earth. We're not here to live here forever. So there will be all sorts of tragedy coming our way. But one thing we should always remember is that if we stay strong, we remain grounded, we could get through anything. And I really applaud you and I thank you. Any final messages? Anyone looking out to reach out to you, how can they get hold of you, Dick?
Yes, the best way to do it is probably um, my email is dick@dickbeardsley.com, or you can go to just www.dickbeardsley.com. It brings me up to my website, and my wife Jill handles all my speaking and things like that. So if you need somebody, a speaker for your company, school, whatever it might be, um, you can get a hold of us that way. And I'd love to come and tell a few stories.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this. Thank you so much. Wishing you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.